Metal fans. They can be passionate, loyal, aggressive, tribal, annoying, supportive, well-informed, misinformed, and at times oscillating. And that's just in general, overarching terms. When you look at individual fan bases of metal bands, you discover a lot of unique qualities. Unique is a nice way to put it. When you have a band you love, you will automatically hope that fellow fans of that band will be good examples of society, or at least not monsters. That being said, it would be unfair if I pointed out individual bands that I don't like and said their fan bases were toxic. I wouldn't have enough experience or data, it's full of bias, etc. That's where AI and Google Bard come in. I can just ask Barty, an unbiased robot, who he thinks has the worst fan base. I hopped on Google Bard and typed, list off the top 10 worst fan bases of metal bands and give reasoning. Barty got vicious, descriptive, repetitive, and a touch confusing, but he gave his list, and before we get going on the list, Barty has a disclaimer this time.
It's important to note that not all fans of these bands are bad. There are many great and supportive fans out there who just love the music. However, these are some of the most notorious fan bases in metal, and they can be a turn-off for some people.
I want to point out now that Barty makes one accusation against fan bases repeatedly. The reason I'm keeping it in every time is that it's because it's so dumb and nonsensical that I think it's legitimately funny. Google's AI glanced at its own search engine for 30 seconds, and these are what Barty thinks are the top 10 worst metal fan bases.
10. Pantera. Pantera fans are often seen as being too redneck and misogynistic. They often wear band t-shirts and hats, and they can be very aggressive and confrontational.
Pantera I was expecting on this list for the diehard obsession for metal fans and for the controversy over the decades. Barty calling Pantera fans redneck and misogynistic is a low, cheap shot, and nothing that Pantera fans probably haven't already laughed at before. Pantera fans also being seen as aggressive and confrontational? Yeah. Think about how many times a man with anger issues has screamed out 5 minutes alone to a group of people just to get their point across. That fits much better than the redneck and misogynistic description. Now with the Pantera tribute that's touring featuring Zakk Wylde, it's interesting to see how older audiences go wild in Florida and Texas for it, as well as seeing Phil Anselmo stop a show to denounce the Confederate flag. Times really have changed. Up is down, hot is cold. Side note, band t-shirts and hats are not a bad thing. Barty feels very differently though. Get used to that complaint.
9. Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath fans are often seen as being too old and boring. They often wear band t-shirts and hats, and they can be very nostalgic and sentimental about the band.
Whether it's Ozzy or Dio era Black Sabbath, apparently Black Sabbath has a terrible fan base. When you think of Black Sabbath as the foundation of metal, that also means that first metal fan base is one of the worst. That's mean, coming from Barty, but so is calling the fan base old and boring. I don't quite understand how being very nostalgic and sentimental about Black Sabbath makes a fan base bad. In fact, that could describe just about any fan base of any medium eventually, and I don't feel Barty would be as upset about it. So methinks Google Bard was really reaching. Or is ageist. I am not sure why the AI's reasoning led to the band being on the worst fan bases. Black Sabbath fans being too old and boring doesn't sound right. Not that many nursing homes have people in Black Sabbath t-shirts.
8. Slayer. Slayer fans are often seen as being too extreme and violent. They often wear band t-shirts and hoodies, and they can be very intense and passionate about the band.
Google Bard describing Slayer fans as too extreme and violent was about as easy as Barty answering if the sky is blue. Few groups have fanatical fans that will carve the band name into their skin because it looks more metal than a tattoo. That's extreme and violent and proves Slayer's fan base as intense. Being very intense and passionate has to be a part of being extreme, so I guess that makes sense, but if it's a fan base, then being passionate is going to be part of it anyway. So I'm not sure why that makes Slayer's fan base as one of the worst. The subject matter of Slayer songs paired with a violent fan base though, yeah, that's good reasoning. I do wonder if Google Bard did look up Slayer images and the wild tattoos and angry men in Slayer t-shirts, and that's what sealed the deal. As you've seen, Barty has some anger issues towards shirts, Slayer or otherwise.
Hello, me. Meet the real me.
7. Megadeth. Megadeth fans are often seen as being too angry and aggressive. They often wear band t-shirts and hats, and they can be very vocal and opinionated about the band.
Megadeth diehards are vocal and opinionated about Megadeth. I understand Barty here, considering that most Megadeth fanatics spend a good amount of time telling everyone that will listen why Megadeth is better than Metallica. Megadeth's music in general, like others on the list, is intentionally angry and aggressive. This is thrash. Anger and aggression are key themes for the music, especially for Dave Mustaine, who loves to sing about war, politics, and just generally how angry he is as a person. Barty is at least more on point with some of the description, but we're talking about the fan base here, and somehow Barty guessed right on comparison to the music. Though being vocal and opinionated about any band is just being a fan to a certain extent. Poor Dave.
You better stand, there's no turning back.
6. Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden fans are often seen as being too old and out of touch. They often wear leather and studs, and they can be very nostalgic and sentimental about the band.
It's getting to the point now where I've gone from laughing at Barty's choices to wondering how Barty made a decision in the first place. I should be glad at least he's no longer mad about t-shirts and hats, but now it's leather and studs. He has a strict fashion sense for metalheads. Iron Maiden fans being old and out of touch? I mean, I guess they can be as old as Iron Maiden band members, but that shouldn't make them out of touch automatically. Not to mention all the changes within Iron Maiden over the decades. I feel you have to be a little in the loop to keep up with all that over the years. Also, it's odd to see Iron Maiden fans as awful for being nostalgic and sentimental. Again, it's almost as if Barty hates when people remember the good times and enjoy music. Like a true metal elitist fan, just angry for any reason.
5. Avenged Sevenfold. Avenged Sevenfold fans are often seen as being too young and immature. They often dress in black and wear band t-shirts, and they can be very loud and obnoxious at concerts.
On the flip side of Iron Maiden fans are the young and immature Avenged Sevenfold fans who are too loud and obnoxious at concerts. Google Bard went full Grandpa Simpson with the old man yells at cloud when describing people who like Avenged. It's adorable to think of middle schoolers in A7X merch getting yelled at by Grandpa. Now that Avenged Sevenfold is about to go on tour again as of this video's posting, it's interesting that Google Bard pulled Avenged as a band with one of the worst fan bases, as the band hasn't even toured consistently in years or put out an album in such a large gap of time. Maybe Barty got angry with a new wave of fans loving Hail to the King. Or maybe Google Bard read younger fans who didn't like Life is But a Dream and took it out on the youth. Either way, you dang kids and your Avenged Sevenfold can get off Barty's lawn.
4. Slipknot. Slipknot fans are often seen as being dangerous and scary. They often wear masks and costumes to concerts, and they can be very aggressive and moshing.
Slipknot fans is dangerous and scary? I mean, maybe the scary description has some validity. I mean, angry Slipknot fans yelling Slipknot lyrics in unison would be intimidating even to a robot. I could see AI interpreting that as dangerous and scary. It's understandable. Aggressive and moshing? First off, that's awesome. Second, I could see moshing being dangerous and scary from the interpretation of AI who is just seeing footage of it and not understanding, so I guess that makes sense. Wearing the mask and costumes, though, is a part of the show for the huge Slipknot fans, especially with older masks and jumpsuits. Now, if those fans are wearing some of the more dangerous masks with spikes or hardware and then moshing, then yes, they are aggressive and dangerous, and that's awful. Someone could get impaled. Still not sure how this makes Slipknot fans some of the worst, though. Maybe that's because I'm one too, and I'm just awful.
3. Five Finger Death Punch. Five Finger Death Punch fans are often seen as being bro-y and macho. They can be very aggressive and confrontational, and they often get into fights at concerts.
Barty calling Five Finger Death Punch fans bro-y and macho is not an unfair generalization, as even the knuckleheads, yes, that's what they refer to themselves as, would be proud to be defined as bro-y and macho. Ivan Moody and company make music specifically for that demographic, so that's an easy definition for Google Bard. I cannot speak for every show ever, but I can confirm that at more than one performance of Five Finger Death Punch, whether concert or festival, I have seen grown men push, shove, slap, and wrestle each other badly while trying to punch each other while Five Finger Death Punch is performing. They bring out the Kyle in some people. It's not a coincidence. Aggressive and confrontational and macho, and they all are looking for reasons to prove how tough they are to strangers. Yes, that's perfect. Barty nailed this one.
2. Black Veil Brides. Black Veil Brides fans are often seen as being teenage girls who are more interested in the band's image than the music. They can be very vocal and obnoxious at concerts, and they often start fights with other fans.
So, on the flip side of the previous for Five Finger Death Punch, I have seen Black Veil Brides perform several times, and never once have I seen high school girls having a cat fight while Andy was on stage. There was never an obnoxious schoolgirl fight with hair pulling and slapping over, Andy looked at me! No, Andy looked at me! Slap, slap, slap. The band's image is a crucial part of Black Veil Brides, and the fans definitely care about that. But I've also never once even known of Black Veil Brides fans fighting each other at shows Five Finger Death Punch style. Also, being vocal at concerts isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's kind of the reason you go at some point. I'm not even really a fan, and I think Barty saying Black Veil Brides having the second worst fan base in metal would be an extreme exaggeration. Barty, again, is an elitist, and seeing teenage girls in metal t-shirts probably sent him into a processor rage.
1. Metallica. Metallica fans are known for being elitist and gatekeepers. They often dismiss other metal bands as not being real metal, and they can be very critical of new or experimental music.
Google Bard is right on this one. Yeah, Metallica arguably has the biggest metal fan base and therefore would also have the massive section of that being the worst metal fan base within the overall group. Metallica fans having the biggest fan base would also lead to having the largest number of gatekeepers and elitists within the fan base, and I think just about every heavy music fan knows at least one Metallica diehard who has shouted "Name 3 songs" at someone in a band t-shirt. Metallica fans, old and new, also being an elitist at what is metal and what isn't fits like a glove, and Metallica fans being critical of new or experimental music is definitely accurate. Even for Metallica themselves. I mean, think about how much Metallica fans complain about anything after And Justice for All. It's hard not to think about Metallica fans as being spoiled and endlessly complaining about Metallica while dropping everything when new music or tours are announced to throw money at the band and praise the band in every aspect, while delusionally defending any missteps, and then getting angry at others for not saying Metallica is the best band ever. I feel that Barty was quite inaccurate for a lot of this list, and I'm not sure why Barty hates t-shirts and hats, but he did bring up a few good points about the fan bases of some bands, especially how some fan bases can be quite toxic without realizing it. No band has a perfect fan base. That especially goes for metal bands. The bigger a group gets, the more likely it'll attract an occasional psychopath or weirdo. It's when a band is known for having problematic fans that a group may want to step back and say, maybe we should address how some fans are awful so it shapes up the rest of them.